So today's topics then are God and the ego, or what is all-encompassing can have no opposite. That obviously is from the introduction to the Course of Miracles, where it says, love is all-encompassing and it can have no opposite, right? So we've looked at this slide a couple of times before, but I want to go over it one more time just so you can see where we're going. We're going to cover each of these different topics. We're going to look at the things which really exist in reality, and we're going to look at all the things that are illusions or do not exist. So today's topic is God's self or the soul or the ego, right? The ego totally, there's no such thing as an ego, no matter how much it looks that way. And very much in keeping with that is also the fact that it's just one mind, and we don't have individual separation. That's what the ego is. The ego is this break off into a separate self or a separate self identity, which does not see itself as whole and as a part of the God self. This is obviously the difference between non-dual and duality. Non-dual state, this is if you are one mind with God, that's a non-dual state. And of course, it's very clear about that. You are a part of the mind of God. But the ego is not going to know that. It's a matter of remembering that this is true. Otherwise, we have duality, in which it looks as though we have two things. We have a self and something else, right? We got duality going on. We don't have, that's the kind of thing that happens with, we have subject object, if you will, and not just oneness. It's the difference between eternity and time. Eternity is one thing. There's no division in eternity. Time is broken into segments, past, present, and future. It's reality, whereas this world is a dream. The ego lives in a dream world. It lives in a fantasy world. And sorry to say, but when we die, when we leave these bodies behind, there's something you can't take with you to heaven. The spirit that has always been true will remain true, but the ego, the self that you think you are in time, that's not reality. So we're going to have to let go of the dream that we're something separate. We're not separate. So all of the stuff we're talking about here is an illusion. The ego's an illusion, separation's an illusion, time's an illusion. So truth is not an illusion. Truth is true. And of course, it's very clear about that. Again, the difference between spirit and body. So the body, the Course is very clear, says the body is the ego's chosen home. So obviously, when you die, you don't have a body anymore. But spirit continues in the same form it was pre-body, post-body. Love is real. And of course, that says that on the very first paragraph in the introduction to the Course. Only what is all-encompassing is real. Love is real. Fear is not. There's no such thing. There's nothing to be afraid of. What are you afraid of? God, love, truth, happiness? You're afraid of reality? No, that's impossible. Of course, within the confines of a body, on an ego level, you may be very afraid of death, for example, because it looks like the death of the body is your death. And it is the ego's death, but it's not your death. And continuing, there's heaven. There's no such thing as hell. God, who has created everything, would not create such a horrible idea as a hell. Hell would be a duality. This would be a separation. There is no separation. Knowledge is something which is pure in terms of A Course in Miracles. Perception is a level of judgment. We're very judgmental about the things that we see. We judge whatever we see. And that's true both in terms of the good and the bad. I mean, pretty, ugly, whatever judgments we're making. This is an abstraction. This is a form. So whatever, the body is a form. The world is a form. When it is abstract or on the idea level, this is difficult for us, I think, because you can't see it. Because it doesn't have form, you can't see it. You can't see an idea. You can't really see love. You can see a demonstration of love. You can see it in form, but in and of itself, it transcends form. It's something that we know. If you're in love, and you know that you are. It's a right mind versus the wrong mind. The wrong mind, the difference between the wrong mind and the right mind is essentially that the wrong mind condemns. It's a judge, condemns the world it sees. The right mind loves or blesses the world it sees. There is a create and might. Create is a part of the function of loving. Make is something of form. We build a house. We make something. We make something in form. Innocence, you are only innocent. You're an innocent child of God. You've always been an innocent child of God. God sees you only as his innocent. God does not see any sin in you at all. But that's not true on the ego level. The ego can experience a tremendous amount of guilt because it realizes that it is off course, that it has done something wrong. It's hurt somebody else. And it can't see, maybe seems like it can't help but do that, but there it is. Obviously, the whole purpose of A Course in Miracles is to get us back to a state of peace. The Foundation for Inner Peace is the publisher of the Course. War is insanity, it is totally opposite from peace. And it's unfortunate that this poor world that we live in has just been one continual war after the other. There's really been just one war going on. As soon as one seems to stop, another war gets started. And if you look back at history, I was looking a little bit at the story of Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan, who was in charge of the largest empire that ever existed, right, all the way from the Sea of Japan to Eastern Europe, humongous empire, was responsible, the article for, it was hard to have statistics back in those days, between 40 and 70 million people died. He would run into a town, he would kill everybody, rape the women, kill the animals, make slaves out of the young men, and force them into they become his soldiers. And they go off and fight in a war for him. And then there's life or there's death. There's only life. There's no such thing as death. Death is a non-existent. That's before. We said the body, the birth of a body, is not a loss or death. It's a continuing, right? So we're going to look at all of this in much more detail. And today we're just going to talk about the soul, self, and the ego, primarily about God and the ego. And also, there's one more thing I want to be talking about this particular 7 weeks. And that is this idea, which I started addressing in the Sunday with Monday pieces. And that is, what is a universal course? So it says in the course, this is a manual for a special curricula intended for teachers of a special form of the universal course. There are many thousands of other forms, all of with the same outcome. They merely save time. And I think you'll find that as far as the universal course is concerned, if we go back to where I was with the cycle, these are all part of the universal course. This is all what it's going to say here. That, for example, one of the characteristics of a universal course is it's non-dual, right? So essentially, this is the way this works, but I'll explain it more. What we're looking at too is how this is true, not simply in the Course in Miracles, but in cases in which the truth is true. For example, in Hinduism, Advaita Vedanta is a non-dualistic system. So that's a characteristic that runs throughout all of the true teaching. If a teaching is dual, as is, going back up here again, for example, here, if the religion, it teaches heaven and hell, as happens in traditional Christianity, then we got a dualistic thing that is not a part of the universal course teachings. So the truth is true. Nothing else matters, nothing else is real, and everything beside is not there. Let me make the one distinction for you that you cannot make, but need to learn. So keep in mind, what we're talking about here is a course in miracles. We are learning. And the learning that we're doing is we are learning how to wake up or to remember something that you already know. So it's already in there. And what we're simply doing is we are exposing the truth. Miracles are everyone's right, but purification is first. So what we got to do is we got to remove what's not true. That's the way you get to the truth. It's not something that's out there that you're going to create. It's something that we find, and it's already there. It's already inside. It's already in your mind. It's already in your beingness, if you will. So it's just a matter of going back there. And one of the essential characteristics, it's not out there. It's in here. So whatever is on the outside, that's something that we make. That is something of form. And no doubt there are those who get very caught up in the form and the outside, and power, fame, gold, money, whatever it is that they're looking for. But there's a lot of problems with that. Number one is that is very fleeting. I mean, very, very fleeting, even in terms of a life. It lasts just a very few years, and then the body, which is a form, dies, and that's gone. So where's your form now? Where's your gold now? There's a story, and Jesus tells one of the parables of the man who built bigger barns. And he says, oh, no, I'm just going to build bigger barns and bigger barns and bigger barns. And I'll store all the goods that I have for myself. And then the particular parable, excuse me, ends with Jesus saying, God saying to him, this very night your soul is required of you. Who then will all these things belong to? So your faith in nothing is deceiving you, and form is nothing in the sense that it's fleeting. It doesn't last. Offer your faith to me. This is Jesus speaking, right? So we got a capital M here. And I will place it gently in the holy place where it belongs. You will find no deception there. Only truth exists in heaven, but only the simple truth, and you will love it because you will understand it. If there's anything that we understand, it's love. And if there's anything we appreciate, it's love because it's so real and so exciting and so genuine. I think for a moment about, let's take our dogs, our pets. They don't have high level thinking, or they can't engage in analytical thinking, can't do math, stuff like that. But boy, oh boy, they have feeling, and they can clearly love, they can clearly engage in that. And that's why we love them so much, and they love us so much. And that's why we like to have them around us. So this is workbook lesson 160. It says, there is a stranger in our midst who comes from an idea so foreign to the truth. So what is so foreign to the truth is the idea that you could be separate from God, separate from the truth, that you could create your own world. You can't create your own world. You can try to do that temporarily. You can even have some success at it. But the truth of the matter is that the only world that there is not this world, it's heaven, it's God's world, it's eternal. And that you're already a part of, as we just got to say. Let me start this over. There's a stranger in our midst who comes from an idea so foreign to the truth, he speaks a different language. Look upon a world truth does not know, and understands what truth regards as senseless. Stranger yet, he does not recognize to whom he comes, and yet maintains his home belongs to him, while he is alien now who is at home. And yet, how easily it would be to say, this is my house, here I belong, and I will not leave because a madman says I must. Okay. The madman is, of course, the ego. So let's look at the Garden of Eden story for a little bit. When I was in seminary back in the mid-60s, we spent some time studying the German theologian Rudolf Bultmann, who developed the concept of demythologizing. It wasn't first with him, but he made the idea popular. The idea is what we want to do is we want to take the myths of the Bible or of any tradition and we want to look at what makes the myth real. Now, what makes the myth real isn't the fact that these events actually occurred, but like the parables of Jesus, they are a story. And this story symbolizes something. It's a good way to explain something what happened. Now, you could take it literally, and there are traditionalists, religionists, Christians who take the story of Adam and Eve, for example, very literally. But it's really fully not that, it's symbolic in its fullness. So, according to Jewish tradition, this is the year 5,782. That's the point when Adam and Eve got kicked out of the garden and time began. Actually, time began. I looked up AI in terms of the AI saying, when did self-consciousness first happen? And it didn't have a time really. So, it's really between 150,000 and 100,000 years ago. We begin to develop language, we begin to have fire, we begin to come together in groups, et cetera, et cetera. Somewhere in there, somewhere along in there, there's this self that becomes the idea of becoming more self-aware. We know that there are certain animals, for example, that have self-awareness. By self-awareness, they can recognize themselves in a mirror. This includes apes, this includes dolphins, this includes elephants, this includes magpies. This is just a small category that will actually understand that that is them in the mirror that they're looking at. Others don't see, they don't have the self-reflect, they don't have the self-consciousness, right? So it's an evolutionary thing. So, and this happens because they eat of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. Now, this is really kind of a strange story. Let's actually read it from the Bible. I've got it in the next page. So, but first, this is from the course, and then I'll read the part from the Bible. So, eating of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil is the point at which in time separation comes into the mind. In reality, there's no separation because there's no time. In that sense, it never happened, right? Evolutionary, you could talk about it, but in time, there's no time, so it never happened. But this is the way it seems to happen. This is very near the end of the course, chapter 27. I'm sure many of you are already very familiar with this passage. Into eternity, where all was one, there crept a tiny, mad idea at which the Son of God remembered not to laugh. We should have laughed at this silly, ridiculous idea. In his forgetting did the thought become a serious idea and possible of both accomplishment and real effect. Together we can laugh them both away and understand time cannot intrude upon eternity. It is a joke to think that time can come to circumvent, which means there is no time. We'll go into much more detail. We'll have one whole session just on the idea of time. So, but time becomes the breaking point, the whole idea that we can be separate. And going on. So this is the passage where we find this story in Genesis. And the woman said to the serpent, we may eat the fruit of the tree of the garden, but the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, you shall not eat, nor shall you touch it, lest you die. Now, this is an interesting thing. One week we'll talk about this. This looks like a setup. I mean, it's a setup on, quote, God's part, right? God sets it up so there's this tree, the fruit of knowledge of good and evil, and you don't touch that, right? You tell a child, put some food in front of them and say, don't eat that, right? Here's candy, but you can't have that candy, right? And then the serpent said to the woman, you will not surely die, for God knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes will be open and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. That's interesting. We'll talk about this. So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was pleasant to the eye, and a tree desirable to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. She also gave her husband, and he ate. and then the eyes of both of them were open, and they knew that they were naked. So that's the last line there, very interesting. They knew that they were naked, but just like, who got naked? How'd you get naked? You weren't naked before. All of a sudden, you're naked. And the whole idea of shame comes into consciousness. The whole idea there's a separation comes into consciousness. The whole idea of division comes in. The whole idea that they have done something wrong. So now what happens with the separation is that we have sin. Something went wrong. And sin, of course, is the equivalent to separation. The central concept in the ego's thought system, the sin, the idea that something that you're broken off, you're separated. Sin is seen by the ego as incapable of correction. This is going to firm up the ego because it represents our attack on our creator, who would never forgive us. This leads to guilt, which demands punishment. Sin is the proclamation that attack is real and guilt is justified. So now we really got a complex situation. We've got sin and guilt and fear all built into the psychic system, and the ego is on its way. And this is a part of I've had this slide before, this is the Christian concept, which is really strange. So this is the God in this whole story is a very strange character. He said, worship me so I can save you from what I'll do to you if you don't worship me. So keep in mind who's writing this story, who's writing this mythology. This is the ego is writing this, right? And so this is the way the ego is building up the story, and God is this all-powerful being, and we've got to do what we can to keep God satisfied and contented and not go wandering off. And it's a way of dealing with the problem, but it doesn't work. So the separation is merely another term for a split mind. So now what's happened is, and this is the way the myth explains it, the division between the knowledge of good and evil. So now we have both of these in our mind. The mind is split. The ego is the symbol of separation, just as the Holy Spirit is the symbol of peace. So the situation we're all in this divided mind situation. We've got the ego and we've got Holy Spirit both. And we've got the situation of now needing to be able to make a decision between the two. Ken Wapnick once said, and I probably have quoted this several times, the central teaching of the Course in Miracles is you're a choice. And we are at choice constantly. Several times a day, many times a day, we can make a decision for ego, or we can make a decision for, the good or the bad, if you will, right? As simple as possible way that this could be expressed, even it would be coming down to food and eating. Do I eat something that I know is probably not very healthy, or do I eat something that I know is good for me? It's that simple in one sense. Of course, it's much more complicated. Do I attack? Do I say something? Do I express my feelings in a way that puts down other people and hurts other people? Or am I able to make a different kind of a choice? Am I able to come from love in every decision that I make? If I can come from love, that's a very good thing. I'm being who I'm supposed to be. If I'm attacking or angry or defensive or whatever it is, then that's the split mind. That's not going to make me feel good about myself, and maybe not about the other either, but definitely not about myself. So of course, it's what you perceive in others, you are strengthening in yourself. You may let your mind misperceive, but the Holy Spirit lets your mind reinterpret its own perception. So this is very important in terms of the Course. We have two guides. This is the split mind, and we're constantly at choice. The choice is between the guidance of the Holy Spirit and the voice of the ego. And so what happens with a Jesus is that Jesus learns how to listen, pay attention only to the Holy Spirit. It says that in the Bible. It's the Holy Spirit that leads him into the wilderness for a time of testing, and he passes the test. The test is he looks at the ego, all the three temptations, all temptations of the ego, takes him to a high mountain, says, look here, bow down, worship me, the ego and all the power, all these kingdoms can be yours. And Jesus says, get thee behind me, Satan. In other words, move, I'm not going to go there. Obviously, egos go there. Big egos go really go there. They're going to, like, that's my country. I'm gonna take that country. Whatever it is, they're going to go for all of it. But that's going to make them and everybody else around miserable, right? Because of this selfishness of the ego. So the question is, you dream of a separate ego and believe in a world that rests upon it. This is very real to you. Now, we all know this is true. We all know this is very, very true. We're consistently up to choice on this. So the course in mind training, this is a course in mind training. We are learning how to become more and more aware of when it is that the ego is speaking, and more quickly and easily saying, no, thank you. I put this aside. Let me go the other way. Let me go with the voice of God. At least this is the good news. The good news is that the voice for God is always there. There's never a second that it's not there. So much of the course is really about trying to help us learn how to pay attention to inner guidance or the Holy Spirit with consistency. And if you can do that, you'll feel good, you'll feel better. And also just kind of learning what it takes to do that. The course itself, the workbook lessons, they're there to help us do that. Meditation, that's there, that's what it's for. But just also at any time you're at a decision point. Look, say, oh, get thee behind me, Satan, and says, oh, I recognize this temptation. I understand that this is something which would take me off course. And so I'm going to say no. It's very simple, right? Except the temptation may be very great. You know, if I'm an alcoholic and I'm dealing with alcohol, let's say, and I really like that stuff, it's going to take a lot of training. I got to train myself how to say no, because I know that's going to hurt me. I know that anger is going to hurt me, or whatever other decision I have to make. So you cannot undo it by not changing your mind about it. So the course is, as Ken said, it's all about changing your mind. If you are willing to renounce the role of guardian of your thought system and open it to me, I will correct it very gently and lead you back to God. So it's just saying yes to the Holy Spirit and no to the quote, the devil. Not that there's a devil, but no to the ego. So the ego is the mind's belief that it's completely on its own. This is really important too. This is the point about separation. See, you are not separate. You're a part of the mind of God already. You've got this guide there to help you. The individuated mind, the separated mind, sees itself as being alone, and that is very lonely. That is a very miserable state. If the ego is consistently making the decisions, and no one wants to go there. No one wants to live there, although it's easy to get so caught in the ego that we consistently are choosing alignment with it. Of course, as the ego is nothing more than a part of your belief about yourself, your other life. That's an important line. Your other life, your life is spirit, your life is soul, has continued without interruption. It's always there. It's always been there. It'll never go away, and has been and always will be totally unaffected by your attempt to dissociate. You cannot disassociate spirit. You cannot disassociate holiness. You cannot disassociate God. You cannot disassociate love. It's always there. It'll always be guiding you. All you got to do is begin to practice to just always make the choice in alignment with spirit. So God is in you in a literal sense. You are part of him, not in you in a literal sense. You are part of him. It's important. So God is not part of you. You are a part of God. Switch on. You're a part of God. It's like you're an organ in the body of God or a cell in the wholeness of God. And as that cell or that organ or whatever it is, you want to be in cooperation with the wholeness of God. And insofar you're in cooperation with the wholeness, then you're going to make the wholeness of God real. So the recognition of God is a recognition of yourself. This isn't arrogance. It's a statement of fact. There's no separation of God and his creation. You will realize this when you understand that there's no separation between your will and mine. Let the love of God shine upon you by your acceptance of me. This is Jesus speaking again, right? My reality is yours and his. By joining your mind with mine, you are signifying your awareness that the will of God is one. So all you're doing, or all you're being asked to do, is to do the will of God. All you want to do is to do what God would have you do. That's all you want to do. The ego would have its own ideas, its own will, its own concept, its own power. But that's nothing. Right? Complete abstraction is the natural condition of the mind, but part of it is now unnatural. It does not look on everything as one. So this idea of complete abstraction. So complete abstraction, it's the problem with it is that we don't understand it because it's not definable in form. It may have expression in form, but it's not definable in form. Words don't work, you know. In the end, you can't say anything. You can say I love you. Well, that's good, but still we're talking about words. What we're really talking about is an experience. And the experience is the thing that matters, right? So God who knows you only now is as incapable of creating the perishable as the ego is of making the eternal. So the perishable is anything which exists in time. Bodies disappear in time. Mountains go to the sea, as the song goes, right? Everything eventually crumbles, and even this world at some point will, as a matter of fact, disappear. It's millions of years from now, but it doesn't make any difference. We won't be around. But still, anything that has a form changes. God does not change. There's no form there as such. It's abstract. Just like an idea is an abstract thing. It's a concept. It's not something that has a form. You could write a formula that would be something that's a physical thing, but it's what that formula stands for that matters, not the piece of paper, not the book, nothing that has form. So abstraction means withdrawing attention from the external world to realize inner truth or unity with the divine. This is very important. What's real isn't what's on the outside. We tend to make what's outside real. You know, if you want to find what the truth is, sit down, close your eyes. It's on the inside, and not in your body, but in the mind. And the mind really doesn't have a form as we understand what form is. That's why it's so difficult for us to grab it. Spirit does not have a form as such. It's not a physical thing, right? Soul too. Soul, spirit, it's all the same. In the Course, abstraction means recognizing the eternal, changeless nature of reality, spirit, as distinct from the illusions of specifics. Specifics with form, body, world, anything. We're not talking about the external. We're talking about the internal, which is inside you, not in your body, but in your mind. So God, of course, is who encompasses all being, created beings who have everything individually, but who want to share it to increase their joy. And I think this is an interesting thing because one thing, for example, that can be shared is an idea. You can share an idea. Nothing is lost in terms of form because it had no form to start with. If you share an idea, now the other person has that idea too, and they take that and the idea can grow and the idea can develop. Love is the same way. You can share love. It's a wonderful, wonderful feeling to be able to share love. As a matter of fact, that's what we want to be doing. We want to be able to share that. Right? So nothing real can be increased except by sharing. I share my idea. I share my love. These are wonderful things. Again, everything material. For example, there are people that you love who have gone. They're not on this planet. The form of that individual is left. There's nothing at all of them, but the idea, the memory, the experience of the love that was there is still there, and that can never be lost. So divine abstraction, of course, takes joy and sharing, divine love. So what the ego is the questioning aspect of the post-separation self, which was made rather than created. So to make up is to construct something which is artificial. It, the ego, is capable of asking questions but not perceiving meaningful answers because these would involve knowledge. So knowledge, as you know, in coarse terms, is something which is abstract. It's up at the top, right? It's separated from perception. Perception is the thing which sees and judges. That's an important point. It sees and it judges, good, bad. The mind is therefore confused because only one-mindedness can be without confusion. And that's what we want to do. We want to get back to the wholeness, the one-mindedness, the part of us that's also a part of God. So I'm going to close with this. This is from lesson 254. Let every voice but God's be still in me. Father, today I would but hear your voice. In deepest silence I would come to you to hear your voice and to receive your word. I have no prayer but this. I come to you to ask you for the truth, and truth is but your will, which I would share with you today. Today we let no ego thoughts direct our words or actions. When such thoughts occur, we quietly step back and look at them and let them be, let them go. We do not want what they would bring with them, so we do not choose to keep them. They are silent now, and in this stillness, hallowed by his love, God speaks to us and tells us of our will as we have chosen to remember him.